Hello to anyone lurking in the chat and or watching in the future. This is Media Musings, the beginning of our Mega Mythos month, where we're discussing various aspects of the American mythos. And of course, we're starting with what I would call a counter myth to the founding myth of, the more prevalent founding myths of America, Hamilton.
I have opinions about that statement.
Okay, I mean, I will say a counter myth to the Christian nationalist founding myth.
Yeah, I mean, within the American mythos, there are always going to be founding myths on either side of the political divide.
Yeah.
Like, since before Jefferson said, don't split up into political parties, America had political parties.
It was Washington that said that.
Washington even. Sorry, my apologies. Yeah. So, all these old white men, they all look the same to me. Let's get the colorblind casting comment out there first. Yeah. Okay. But basically, since that's been said, America has been split and always will be. Yeah. We're very much looking at a modern reinterpretation of the American founding myth here.
Yeah.
And this is very much an attempt to take post-Obama, post-Trump, what America would call left-wing politics, and make the founding myth appealing to the audience that believes in those politics.
Though
this is not. It's not birth of a nation. It's the complete political opposite of that, but it is equally pure propaganda.
Yeah. It's probably best to contemporize or to describe it as post-Obama Trump contemporary.
Yeah. But again,
because while the film version was released in 2020, it was running on Broadway since like 2016.
Yeah. So when I say post-Trump, what I mean is post the election of Trump.
Yeah.
And by that I mean post the political situation in America that allowed for the election of Trump.
Yeah.
And the subsequent fallout of that, which we're still seeing.
Yeah.
But that great political divide, and what it's trying to do, it's trying to speak to the people who voted for Hillary and Bernie when Trump got it. That's what this entire thing is appealing to. This film is not. If you are from south of Mason-Dixon, this is not for you.
Yeah.
Like, unless you are a progressive political person trying to get out of that area, this show is not for you. It's very honest about that fact, but it's also it wraps its propaganda up in a veneer of honesty. It basically does what Hamilton did when he released that pamphlet about his mistress. I'll be honest, so you can't hold it against me, while I'm also pulling all this other shady shit. But we'll get to that. This film tries to pitch Hamilton as... before I start, hi, American Studies graduate here. I know what I'm talking about. This film tries to pitch Hamilton as, quote, wholesome, immigrant, orphan.
I'm just going to leave that there.
Pauper. None of these things were true. Well, the last one is kind of true. Okay, so, wholesome. His mother wasn't a whore. His mother was married before she met his father, ran away from the man and met his father on a different Caribbean island. And they were never married, but only because his father didn't want to open up the woman to accusations of bigamy. He wasn't an orphan. There is a letter from Hamilton's father to Hamilton in 1793 1993 on the founder's online website. So he wasn't an orphan. And, that's fairly, he wasn't an orphan. He lived away from his father, but he wasn't an orphan. Immigrant. He was born in the Caribbean, as you Americans say.
Yeah.
He
literally just moved from one part of the British Empire to another.
Yeah. This is the equivalent of moving states in the US now.
Yeah.
It's like Ring is as much an immigrant as Alexander Hamilton was for moving from Montana to Maryland.
Yeah.
Paul. After his mother died, they lost everything. All of her things were sold because her first husband, or her ex-husband, basically came in and sold the lot. History shows that a family friend or a friend of his mother's bought the Hamilton family library, which consisted of 34 books, and gave them to Alexander. And that's all he had left of after his mother died. His father was distant in another country, but there was always a relationship there. There are letters between Hamilton and his father where they refer to each other as father and son. The father never claimed that Alexander wasn't his. So yes, technically he was a bastard. That bit's true. That's the only bit of that entire setup that's true. But like, even in the letters, it's your loving father, your devoted son.
Yeah.
There's a relationship there. Yeah, that he might have grown up away from his father, started young and everything else. There's also a little bit of confusion about how old Hamilton was. There's like 2 possible years of birth. And it's mainly because there's one document written in Dutch that says a different birth year. There's only 2 years in it. It doesn't make all that much difference, except for the fact that Hamilton built himself a reputation as this bright young man. But if he'd have been 2 years older, would he have been any less intelligent and any less political? No. So in practical terms, it makes zero difference whatsoever. That's the broad history of the man. There are other bits of history I want to talk about as well. This we were discussing beforehand, and I think it's best we take this show thematically because it's 2.5 hours long, and if we try and go, we'll be talking for 4 hours.
Yeah, and we're on a time crunch.
Yes, his abolitionist beliefs. Yes, he helped find the New York Manumission Society. So far as we can tell, Hamilton never, ever had an inkling towards complete eradication of slavery. It was never something he even considered was possible. Whether it was something he idealized, we don't necessarily know that, but it's not something that he was actively fighting for. And a lot of what words that are put in his mouth in this play are actually, I'd have felt more comfortable if they were put in Loren's mouth. Because Loren was the big abolitionist. Loren was the one who said, let's get black slaves fighting and give them their freedom after the Civil War. He was the one who came up with that idea first, and Hamilton kind of jumped on with that. I'm not saying Hamilton didn't believe in it just as much, just that idea did not start.
And I mean, while technically it was a civil war at the time, we call it the Revolutionary War. The Civil War comes later.
The American Civil War comes later. This is the Revolutionary War, as it became known. Although, kudos to the writer for calling it the Civil War in the play. Kudos for that, because that's what they called it at the time. Because it was a civil war. Where else are we looking at? what else do I want to talk about with him? We've got that his father's alive. The Maria Reynolds scandal, that's a pretty accurate retelling. I wouldn't quote it in a history essay, but for lay folks, yeah, that's pretty much how it went down. Destroyed Hamilton's career. He basically had to choose between his bank and his political stance and his personal life and his political career, and he chose to leave a legacy. It's basically what happened. You can read the Renault pamphlet. It is online. I think Ring's got the link. I gave
the link's in the chat. It will be in the description when I can edit the description.
Cool. I strongly recommend reading it, if only to get an idea of what really happened. Hamilton's... Look, the man may not have invented the term purple prose, but he sure as fuck perfected it. Okay, same with the Federalist Papers. He you know, when Burr says, speak less, smile more, be precise. Hamilton didn't listen to any of that.
So like the three things that were right is he was kind of poor, he was a bastard, he wrote like he was running out of time.
Yeah, definitely wrote like he was running out of time. The pseudonym he used for the Federalist Papers Publius is its own entire rant, which I'm not going to get into. Suffice to say, there is ample evidence that this man did not have the imagination that this play gives him. This play suggests that he is dyed-in-the-wool, Republican, abolitionist, progressive thinker, kind of man who wouldn't be out of place talking to students in 2020.
Yeah.
The problem is he wasn't, and he was a man of his time, but the play doesn't allow him to be that. Publius as a name it's a lot, but it strongly indicates, as well as some other stuff Hamilton said and speeches he made in his life, there was a slur campaign against him to say he was a secret monarchist. I don't think he was a secret monarchist. I don't. Having studied these papers in depth and this man in depth at uni, which is why this play annoys me so damn much. He had an opinion that the presidency should be elected, should be subject to impeachment if it be the will of Congress, but should also be election for life, like the Pope, basically. His position was, like a tenured professor, you cannot have a presidency that changes too often, because then the president's only ever thinking about getting re-elected and can never get anything done.
Yeah.
It's all the same arguments as tenure. There's arguments on both sides. Choose your horse. Personally, I'm not for it, although it would depend entirely on who got elected.
Yeah.
Strongly recommend also reading the anti-federalist papers. They are a little bit wacky, and they are a little bit and they do pick a needle, and they're very they know they're against the Federalist Papers, they just don't quite know what they're for. They can pick an argument. They're great critics, they're great criticisms of the Federalist Papers, but they're not offering an alternative. You know, there's an anti-federalist paper against the Bill of Rights, and the argument is, if we have a Bill of 10 rights, people will think that's the only rights they've got. Well, no, because one of those rights is the right to add more rights.
Yeah.
You know, it's, they are a bit wacky, but they do form a fairly comprehensive criticism of the Bill of Rights and give you an idea of the contextual argument. But Hamilton wrote, again, the numbers are right, he wrote like 50 odd of the Federalist Papers. Don't try and read all of. No one's read all of them. My American politics professor at university has not read all of the Federalist Papers. I know this because I remember asking him if he had and if we had to, because I was that keen undergraduate who wanted to do everything.
Yes.
And he told me, no, don't bother. Just go read like a description of them, and you'll be fine. Read the Wikipedia page. That's all you need to know. And if you need to know anything more, I'll give you the direct reference so you don't have to wade through it. But it is worth reading one or two of them, whichever ones are on a topic that suits your fancy, just to get an idea of what kind of a writer Hamilton was. If you close your eyes, put your hand in a hat with all the Federalist Papers on a piece of paper, pull one out at random, 2 out of 3, you're going to pull a Hamilton one, so just take your pick.
Yeah.
He was a bit more of a hedger than he stated. As I said, he wasn't all in on anti-slavery. He wasn't all in on elected presidency. He wasn't all in on a lot of things, but he had his opinions, and he was very much the whole thing with calling out Burr as not standing for anything, which I know you two have got opinions on, which I share, so I'll let you get a word in a minute. Basically, it's one of those things you could stand, and I think everyone in any democratic or vaguely democratic nation, and I say vaguely with a massive chip on my shoulder, could stand to take a leaf out of the book of vote for the man who you know what he stands for, even if he doesn't stand for the same things you do, because at least then you know where he actually does stand. Because better the devil you know. That's literally what that boils down to, better the devil you know. And he had a point. Jefferson is his whole entire thing. And one day we will talk about the myth of the Jeffersonian ideal and Jeffersonian politics, but not here and not now. Because,
Time.
He did create the Bank of New York City. That was a thing that he did, which became the de facto central bank of America. And he did get slammed for it. And Ring, if you could just drop a quick content/trigger warning for me. If you look into that era of his history,
where
you will find there's some statements in the 1930s. There's a small group of historians. The date is not as significant as you think it is, but it's still probably still significant in the context of what these historians were writing. There was a fringe idea that Hamilton may have been Jewish. That his father's last name, or that his father's mother was Jewish, and therefore he was of Jewish descent. Bind that up with him creating the central bank and the slur campaign about that, and it becomes very icky very quickly. That has been thoroughly debunked. It was based on his father's last name, or like his biological father's last name. And this is me trying to remember from 12 years ago, folks. His biological father's last name sounded like a Jewish name and could have been mistranslated when he came to America, or mispronounced, and therefore it's tenuous at best. It's really fucking tenuous.
So that is kind of ironic, because there's also like...
Yes, he called for I'm getting there. He called for an Episcopalian priest on his deathbed.
No.
Pastor, priest, whatever.
No. They're currently going around the Fundy Q circles. There's, particularly in the cult of Trump, he's the second Messiah section.
Okay, is it Biden's father we've got to look for, or is it Harris's?
So, No, the theory is all the founding fathers were secretly Jewish, making America the new Israel. So Trump can be the Messiah.
What?
Yeah.
That's so many levels of stupid. It's not even like yeah. I'm sorry. I'm just processing that live because Rin's never told me that before.
So that I have heard that one too.
There's a lot to
Yeah.
unpack there. There is a lot to unpack in that statement. But honestly, I'm just going to pick up the entire suitcase and throw it on the fire. Because it ain't worth it. Just, it's got moths and fleas and rats. Just throw it away.
Yeah.
Yeah. And tip the bellboy extra for having to even go near that thing. Wow. Wow. That's a...
Yeah, like I said,
you know that there's a Bible under one of the main buildings in the US because it was deemed No, stay on topic. Stay on topic. Okay, right. We'll discuss that another time.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So we did the central bank. There's a comment that's passed relevant to the central bank, and I'm basically running through all the history so we can get that out of the way and then just talk about the show.
Yeah.
There's a line. Virginians' debts are paid. Why should Virginia pay for New York's debts?
Yeah.
The comeback to that line is spot fucking on. The reason Virginia has no debts is because it doesn't pay for labor. And also, Virginia was nose deep in debt.
Yeah.
Like the southern states were knee deep in debt. They were, and it only got worse. Like they were at a point where if it wasn't for slavery, their economies would have collapsed 30 years before the Civil War. At least. So kudos for that one. But no, Virginia's debts weren't paid, although it was a good political soundbite. There was no secret affair between Hamilton and the sister, or their letters. Again, you can read their letters at Founders Online. They're very intimate, they're very friendly, they're very chatty. There's a letter where Angelica writes to Eliza and says, if you loved me, you would share your husband. It's a joke, folks, sister's joke. If you know two AFAB people, they've joked about sharing their spouses before. I've joked about sharing my spouse with other AFAB people. It's fucking normal. It's a joke. Don't get hung up on it. They were close friends. They had political ideals. I would have loved to see in an alternate history those two get married because that's the power couple America needed. Because she was a socialite and she was probably like the Princess Diana of her day or the Jackie Kennedy of her day. Like she had there was a lot of power behind her socialite status. What's the other historical thing I want to point out? Right, the dueling. There's a line that keeps getting repeated in this song. Look him in the eye and aim no higher. That's important. That's the 13th rule of the Code of Julie. That says, and I quote, because I've got it here in front of me, because I've got the wording, no dumb shooting or firing in the air is admissible in any case. The challenger ought not to have challenged without received offence, and the challenged ought, if he gave offence, to have made an apology before he came on the ground. Therefore, children's play must be dishonourable on one side or the other, and is accordingly prohibited. So all this thing about Alexander Hamilton, the honourable man who doesn't want to kill in a duel, bullshit. That's absolute fucking nonsense. If you have got to the point in a duel, don't forget there's 10 steps before that in the duel where you've had the chance to drop this argument and accept satisfaction by apology. You've had your chance. You should not have got to this point if you don't want to kill the man you're walking in front of. Like, that's the point you're at here.
Yeah.
So this whole thing of, killing a man, that's an entirely modern sensibilities on Julian. Did it happen? Yes. Did Hamilton lift his gun? Yes. Would that have been considered the honourable thing to do? Absolutely not. Not to anyone who knew anything about how Julian actually worked, which was pretty much every person. And for the record, yes, it would have been taught in boarding school. That's my list of historical inaccuracies, clarifications, statements. Let's talk about the show.
Okay. So, Hamilton's not the only one that gets represented incorrectly. Like, for instance, Lafayette wasn't the ardent revolutionary that he is portrayed as. I mean, he may have been when he was in America, but when he went back to France, he sided with the king and actually led a massacre of French revolutionaries.
Lafayette was to revolution as... Which one ran Monticello? Jefferson, Washington? Again with the names.
Jefferson.
As Jefferson was to slavery.
Yeah.
He supported it when it suited him. He supported it when he was at home because it suited him. And he opposed it when he was away because it suited him.
Yeah.
I have opinions on Jefferson. None of them good.
And a lot of French support for the revolution was basically France going, haha, fuck the British.
Yeah, basically. The French did not give a flying monkey's toss about a colony's right to self-determination or whether they paid tax on their tea or not. The French did not give a shit. What the French gave a shit about was sticking two fingers up at the British. Frankly, that hasn't changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, there's a great sketch on Yes Minister of we went into Europe to screw the French by siding with the Germans, and there's an entire rant that Humphrey gives, which is perfect. Go look it up. That explains British. It's a British foreign policy. Yes Minister, you'll find it.
Yeah.
It's a better explanation than I could give. The French did not really give a shit, and if they'd have had anything resembling forethought, they probably wouldn't have backed America in their revolution, because that became the template. And a lot of the political rhetoric in the French Revolution was, well, America.
Yeah.
Even in Haiti, when Haiti rebelled, but America.
It's like when you're an imperialist colonial power, it's not a good idea to let other colonies rebel unless you're planning on taking them.
Exactly. And to be fair, I have an entire rant on the Louisiana Purchase that we're just going to pretend doesn't exist for now.
Yeah.
But opinions.
Well, speaking of Louisiana Purchase, so Jefferson's portrayal?
Opinions. Was Jefferson an effective military leader? Yes. Like, on balance.
You've got Jefferson and Washington mixed up again.
Old white men! Too many old white men to keep track of, I swear.
Jefferson only Well, Jefferson only shows up in the second half of.
Yeah. So I have opinions about Washington too, then. But yeah, it's Jefferson. The so-called Jeffersonian ideal is for a country that is majority rural, run by small subsistence farmers, small family-run farm holdings, and it's basically a Republican wet dream.
Yeah,
that's the Jeffersonian ideal. That's what the Republican Party has been claiming as its political goal for the last 80 years.
I mean, when they're not just outright proclaiming Christian nationalism.
Yeah. But to be fair, Christian nationalism and Jeffersonian ideals go hand in hand anyway. Yeah. Christian farmers on a small farmstead, it all goes hand in hand. Basically, Jeffersonian ideal is the Amish. But, that's what the Jeffersonian ideal is. Which is utter nonsense. Progress would stagnate if it went anywhere at all. And it's not sustainable long term, particularly in the south of the US, where it's impossible to farm that land to any degree of subsistence. Subsistence, that's the word I'm looking for. And it's impossible to farm that to subsistence or to even turn a small profit without something resembling slave labor, because it's just not there. There's a reason instead of digging the top of the land, they started digging down for oil. It just makes more money. It's easy to automate. Without automation or slavery, American land is like 90%, like 70%, that middle bit of America is just not profitable as farmland. It's just not, full stop. You could not make that profitable if you had 100 robots working every square mile of the land. You could not make that profitable because the robots would use more electric than they would produce of anything else.
Yeah.
No. And that's an economic reality that America, and particularly the Republican Party nowadays, but the right wing in America, the South in America, does not want to admit to. But it is also the economic reality that underpins the rampant poverty in most South American states and will continue to underpin them long term.
Yeah.
Because those areas have got nothing else, so they have to farm, but the farming's not that good either. It's like trying to farm the Sahara. It's not going to happen. You've been lucky, there's a reason, like, most of Africa doesn't live in the deserty bit. It's one of those things. It's just a geographical truth. And it's not something they like to admit to, but it is the truth. Take it or leave it. I've got citations if anyone wants them, or you can just Google it. I strongly recommend you Google it. Don't take anything I say as gospel. Go find out for yourself. But Jefferson to me is... Let me put it this way. I can see how the people who idolize Jefferson went on to vote Trump. And I'm going to say that, and I'm going to say no more on that.
Yeah. And so, are you going to go into your thoughts about how Jefferson was cast?
I know Chaos has a comment to make on that. So I'm going to let Chaos say that, because Chaos hasn't spoken for the last half hour.
Yeah.
I'm going to let Chaos open that conversation, and then I'll have my next hissy fit in between getting a drink because my throat's parched. I'll stop talking yet.
So my thoughts on, yes, Jefferson, but also the casting in general, is that they had a diversity of casting and a colorblindness of casting, sometimes with great irony and almost humor in it. Yeah. But the diversity of thought within the production was insanely limited. It was very much presented as not only just the American myth, but the white American myth. And it resulted in perspectives of, black people Native people, actual immigrants. The list goes on of people who were just kind of ignored.
Yeah,
All
or
of it.
more specifically, rather than the, you know, or more specifically, the white liberal American myth.
Yes.
And it is very much the white liberal American myth. It's the myth of the abolitionists and the Underground Railroad. And yes, that was great. Good on you for helping out. But you didn't run those days. You didn't run from the south to the north. You weren't the one whose life was at risk. You weren't the one who had to leave everything not knowing what you were going to. You helped, and absolutely, white people, good job. Good job for doing the bare fucking minimum of helping people escape slavery and exist in freedom. Good job.
Additional note, even that was overplayed because I'm sure Noodle has lots of thoughts on this. But while Hamilton occasionally was on paper an abolitionist, he did in fact buy slaves.
No, he didn't. I think
I'm pretty sure he did for his.
Or maybe an uncle.
Okay, because I read that he did for his parents-in-law.
Or an in-law, something like that. Someone left him slaves in a will. But because he was, quote, a bastard child, unquote, and because he was not legally capable of inheriting them, they were free. Or they were sold on, I don't know. He never owned his own slaves, but that doesn't mean he didn't want to. And I don't know whether he wanted to or not, but I cannot discount that possibility. I've seen no evidence for or against what he wanted as a person.
Yeah.
And what he stood for. His in-laws definitely owned slaves. Definitely, without a doubt. His wife's family definitely owned slaves. And he never seems to have spoken against that. He seems to have been very pragmatic in his approach to slavery. His approach seems to be slavery exists. Slavery is a necessary evil. I want to free as many slaves as I can. I do not see a point at which slavery can cease to exist. That seems to have been from his behavior and his life story where he stood on the topic. So he was an idealist. The most charitable reading that this one gives is he was an idealist, an abolitionist who just didn't have the clout to make it happen. And accepted that and worked within the system he is. The problem is, working within a system that has slavery is like trying to join the police force and change it from the inside. The whole fucking tree's rotten, you've got to cut it out of the root. It don't work. Yeah. As Lincoln would go on to prove.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't like assuming anyone's intentions or beliefs in history because we just don't know unless they physically said it or literally wrote it down or there's something.
Yeah.
He was not an ardent abolitionist. He was not the kind of man who would be going out protesting or anything like that. Yes, he founded the Manumission Society. Anyone could put their name on a piece of paper and organise a few get-togethers. And to be honest, his wife probably did more for the anti-slavery movement after he died than he ever did while alive. And definitely, of the two of them, Lawrence, who is the character who dies young in about a third of the way in the play, definitely was the staunch abolitionist, definitely was. I think Hamilton wrote, there's a line that's put in Washington's mouth about Hamilton at the end of the play that is actually something Hamilton wrote about Lawrence, which is it's along the lines of basically TLDR, only the good die young.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the attitude. Lawrence was, again, not for complete abolition. None of them in that era were for complete abolition. It would have been ridiculous. But there was certainly Lawrence, there's writings of Lawrence saying, you know, he believes that black people have just the same intelligence as white people, have the same faculties, the same capabilities, which definitely leans towards an abolitionist viewpoint.
Yeah.
And again, those words are put in Hamilton's mouth in this play, which I understand the need to create a hero. And Hamilton was not a nice bloke. Hamilton was not a nice bloke. He was not even a kind bloke. And you see that very early on. He wants a war for the sake of his own ambition. And that's...
Yeah.
Again, I have no evidence for or against that statement, but I can believe it.
Yeah.
He was the letter Hamilton wrote to get him off the island and to America that got the attention of the community, who clubbed together to get him his fare across. Was after the hurricane. He wrote to his uncle or father about the hurricane, but also as he wrote, he basically hellfire and damnation. It was all hellfire and damnation. How it was how it was the will of God that the hurricane had come. You've all heard those kind of sermons. You know what they're like. He wrote that. He wrote it to whoever he wrote it to. That person showed it to a local newspaper, who were stunned not only by the boy's ability to write at all, given that he was about 13 or something at the time, maybe a bit older, but also about they call it the verve, the passion with which he wrote.
Yeah.
I don't think the word they use is passion, but the passion with which he wrote, and that's what got everyone's attention. And when it was published, people clubbed together. They said, "This boy's got a promising future. Let's get him to America. Let's get him educated." That did happen. People, it's 18th century Kickstarter like that.
Yeah.
This was going on.
Or 18th century GoFundMe.
GoFundMe, yeah. This is exactly what's going on. This was, yeah. People will always back the winning horse, and the kid clearly had a gift for writing.
Yeah.
And he does have a gift for writing, but he goes on and on. Okay, now you think I talk a lot? I don't talk half as much as that guy writes. No.
Yeah.
Like,
also...
I look at Hamilton and I'm like, dude, shut up. Talk less.
It
Smile
seems to
more.
me, though, that in certain ways, it seems to me that he kind of half took Burr's advice way earlier than this musical would lead you to believe. Like, from what limited understanding I have, it seems like he was very much a career politician.
Yes, he did. He talked less, and he got on with it, and he worked within the confines. The man was not a radical.
Yeah.
He was not by any means a radical. If you read the Federalist Papers, he's everything he writes in the Federalist Papers is not even. There's very little within there that you would put on either side of the political spectrum. He's a classic middle ground man who clearly cares more about economics than state matters, and he's just, yeah. None of these guys, look, there are three fields in politics. You can be good at foreign policy, you can be good at domestic policy, or you can be good at economics. If you're good, you can pick two.
Yeah.
Hamilton was economics. Washington was domestic.
Yeah.
Jefferson was foreign. Like, that's how that little group worked.
Yeah.
Adams just, they're right. He shit the bed.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
There's no other way to describe it.
So we have four accuracies. Hamilton was a pauper, something of a pauper, ish. Hamilton was a bastard. Hamilton wrote like he was running out of time. The John Adams jokes.
Yeah. And you probably know more about the history of John Adams than I do, because frankly the man didn't interest me, and I went to
like all we learn about him in like the only mark he left on U.S. history was he was the president between Washington and Jefferson.
Yeah. And let's be honest, he was president because Jefferson hadn't come back yet.
Yeah.
Like, that's what happened there.
Yeah.
So, yeah. This film, right, we've talked about the history, and we can sit here and we can hammer the history to death or not.
Now,
look, all of that, the last 40 minutes said, I do not think when this play was written that it had a duty to say any of that. But once again, the audience fucked it. The audience ruined it.
Yeah.
Because people have chosen to take it as a historical document, a historical text. That's why we've just spent 40 minutes talking about the history of it and the inaccuracies.
Yeah.
Not because I think that a musical on Broadway has a duty to historical accuracy, because it fucking doesn't. And the audience should know better, but unfortunately...
See, I actually would disagree with you here, only because Lin-Manuel Miranda has said in interviews, and that's part of what encouraged people to take this as historically accurate, that he went to historians throughout the writing process, and they confirmed that it was all historically accurate.
I mean, he clearly did, but there's also scope for creative... there's creative scope within that.
Yeah.
It is broadly accurate. Again, all the things we've pointed out are nitpicks.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They are... He's stretched the truth here, and he's squeezed it there, and he's played with the timelines a little bit, all in the name of creative. And that's all fine within creative license. But the audience has decided, rather than saying, this is a story that we took creative license with, has gone, no, this is a historical textbook. No, it's not.
Now,
and if you shouldn't assume it is.
And, well, like all tellings of the American founding myth, like, yes, I did say it's a counter myth, as counter to the white Christian nationalist, America was ordained by God myth.
Counterpoint to your counter myth, Stephen.
Okay.
This is the myth, and the ordained by God Christian nationalist are the counter myths, because this is the progressive, anti-imperial, anti-royal myth that America built its propaganda on.
Well, I was going to say that there is a central theme to both of these myths that run counter to each other. And that is, America was always about what it is currently about.
America was always about what I personally believe America is about.
And
signed the author.
Yeah. And that brain. But America's ideals are unchanging, and it was always a shining beacon on the hill of either liberty and equality or
rural,
or being Christian.
Yeah. Okay. So I need to say something that I've said this to Americans in the past, and it's blown their mind. Not you, but other Americans. Your Constitution is not set in stone.
Yeah.
In fact, the part of the Constitution that most Americans believe is the most important, the Bill of Rights, was not written when the Constitution was codified.
That's
They
why
are
they're called amendments.
Yes. You would be surprised how many Americans don't grasp that.
Yeah.
And how many Americans think that the Constitution is this perfect document that cannot be changed. It can be changed, it should be changed, and it was designed to be changed.
Yeah.
Just because your Constitution is codified doesn't mean it's inflexible. And
So,
we're getting into the nitty-gritty of constitutional law and culture, but having a codified constitution matters. Sticking to it, like, it doesn't matter what the founding fathers would have thought in 2022.
Yeah.
What matters and what the founding fathers, if you want to know what the founding fathers intended, they intended rule by the people and progress for progress' sake. That's what they intended with that document. Therefore, if you are putting a stop to progress because you think that the Constitution should never be changed, you are wrong. Categorically, you are wrong. The Constitution exists to be altered. That's what it's for. It's a descriptive. It's not prescriptive. It's descriptive. It's not designed to be a roadmap. It's designed to be a postcard. Insofar as it's not telling you where to go, it's showing you where it's been.
Yeah, and though I will say one thing for the musical.
Yes.
With the exception of one character, it does take a step down from outright deifying the founding fathers to merely heroifying them.
Okay, I want to know in what way you're using those terms, because to deify and to make heroic or heroify, as you just put it, in classical terminology is very similar. In fact, it's, you could worship a hero and make a deity. So, what do you mean by that?
So, for the most part, American founding myths put the founding fathers of the unreachable paragons of the American ideal. And I would say that they are something of an unofficial pantheon, at least in the American political psyche.
Yes.
Now, and when I did say deify, it's more of a post-classical Christian sense of the word.
That was the question I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Because and I'm sure Chaos has opinions on this if you'd like to jump in when I'm done. In the sense of deify, in how I understand it, being polytheist, to present these people as near godlike but with faults, that's deifying to me.
Yeah, I mean.
But in the post-Christian sense, to present them as faultless paragons of virtue, yes, that's definitely post-Christian usage of that term. I agree with if you are using the words deify and heroify in the post-classical sense, in the post-Christian sense.
Which I am.
Yes.
And of course, the one exception I'm putting is George Washington, because if Hamilton does worship Hamilton a lot, but it worships George Washington more.
Yes, it does.
And no one's allowed, and George Washington is the Jupiter of the American pantheon.
The Jove, yes.
I'm
going to. make a comment, and this may blow up your comments.
Yeah. I don't even know if we have viewers, so.
It may blow up your comments, it may also blow your mind, or it may not, or you may completely agree with me, or you may not. And can you tell I'm hedging?
Yeah.
I'm not hedging, I'm just preparing you because, again, this is a comment that occasionally blows Americans' minds. Hamilton worships Washington because America worships war. And we will discuss that in a lot more depth next week.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, and I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are on this noodle, but I would almost compare Washington to Churchill.
In the popular imagination,
In the common conception form, yes.
yes. In the common conception, there are definite parallels between the public image of Churchill and of Washington.
Yeah.
And actually, if you look at the faults of both men and the vices of both men, there's similarities there too.
Yeah.
America, you ain't original, and you ain't original. Don't try to be. And that's the point I wanted to make for this stream. That's why I told you to name I am original. None of this story is a story that's new. It's just been put together in a new way. This kind of propaganda exists. Look, even when they wrote the Federalist Papers, do you know off the top of your head, Ring, as the American in the room and therefore the whipping boy of this particular stream or the whipping girl of this particular stream?
Yeah, the whipping day of this month.
Yes. Do you know the pseudonyms under which they wrote the Federalist Papers without Googling them?
No, I only know Hamilton's because you mentioned it.
Right. Hamilton wrote as Publius, as in Publicola. I may be mispronouncing that, but it's ancient Latin, don't at me. And the other writer, the other best-known writer of the Federalist Papers, used the pseudonym Brutus, as in 8-2.
Yeah.
Which I think says a lot about their opinions on monarchy and single and ruling of a single person. Publius was known to have been. He basically came out of nowhere, took power, and there's a story that you can find in Plutarch of Publius, and do read Publius's life story in Plutarch. It's only like 10 pages long. It's well worth a read, and you can get like modern translations, where he lived in a house in Rome that was so rich, rumors started going round that he fancied himself a king. So these rumors got back to him, and this is why he was deemed to be a man of the people, because rather than flipping his lid, he had the building torn down and made himself homeless. Until the people, ashamed at their, and as Plutarch puts it, the people ashamed of their prior jealousy, clubbed together and built a house for the leader of Rome. Like a state, like the equivalent to the White House. And he lived there, and it was much less grand than his own previous dwelling. And he died a pauper, and the people got together and decided that because he was a man of the people, he should. It's basically a state funeral that they gave him. And he was buried like in the center of Rome, and his family were given perpetual rights to be buried there. But what became tradition was his family members, when they died, a burning torch would be taken to the spot where they should have been buried, and then blown out there as a signal that they basically that they abdicated the honor have been buried there.
Yeah.
So the entire family's reputation is people of the people who didn't want to get too far, who didn't want to fly too close to the sun, basically, who learned from the Icarus myth. And Publicola's that's in Publicola's reputation. In history, if you read Plutarch, obviously read it with a pinch of salt because of Plutarch. As with any ancient source. But yeah, that's what Hamilton tried to present himself as. That's why he wrote under that name. This the man who had previously made speeches calling for a lifetime term for the presidency.
And
what a man is and what a man ideals are two very different things.
And you know, as a retelling of, you know, as a presentation of a spin on the founding myth, it is more inherently political than most other. You know, all media is political. This is more inherently political than most.
This is inherently political. This is a deliberate political take on it. And this is also a very deliberately written to appeal to a modern audience. And
because it is so inherently political, there are bits of it that have aged interestingly in just the past 5 years.
Yes. And I know you passed a comment on that, so I'm going to let you say it because I think that comment has to come from the American England.
Yeah, because, you know, during the second act, there's a song between George Washington and Hamilton about, we're going to teach them how to say goodbye.
Yeah.
And I saw Hamilton when it released on Disney Plus on July 4th, 2020, and I saw it just again, you know, to pregame for the show. And that song hits a whole heck of a lot differently after January 6th.
It does. Although I still think we didn't, because we watched it at the similar time in 2020, didn't we? It still, for me, it still had a hint of irony because January 6th didn't come out of nowhere. Like, we expected January 6th on, like, November the 1st. Like, that did not come out of nowhere. We were calling that something like that was going to happen in, like, August the year before.
Yeah. And for specific dates on when I specifically called January 6th, there is a playlist about, like, with, like, 3 separate videos of me going over January 6th.
Yeah, and I think as well, because we were saying it was probably going to be the 8th, and it caught us off guard that it hit that quick. Were we expecting it on the 8th?
I said it would be the 6th when I learned about the rally.
Yeah, but before we knew about the rally, I think we were saying the 8th.
Or the 20th.
Yeah, or the 20th on Inauguration Day.
Yeah.
We were expecting something. So it didn't come out of nowhere, and that coloured my viewing of it the first time I watched it.
Yeah.
The problem is, that's a very sound political move. That song is, from a political viewpoint, correct.
Yeah.
If Washington had stayed in power until he died, the American experiment would have failed.
Yeah.
Because there would have been no clear successor. Because they were all around the same age, they were all dying off around the same time.
Yeah.
But also because it would have set the same problem America has now with the Constitution. It would have said, what would Jefferson have wanted? What would Washington have wanted? What would any other founding father have wanted? What did the people who signed the Constitution mean? John Hancock meant that he needed a smaller pen.
Yes. Or better fine
Teaching
motor
jokes about
skills.
motor- Yeah, better fine motor skills. Yeah, it's it's one of those things where you see it. The best conceptual comparison, and I say conceptual, is if you ever get the chance to, I strongly recommend study the history of the USSR just before and just after the death of Lenin and the power struggles that ensued. That's the alternate history to Washington stays in power till the day he dies. Washington dies, a power struggle ensues. You get maybe a few decades of people duking it out and a little bit, and either it falls or it flies on its own merit.
Well, and I mean,
Let's be honest, the American system was never going to fly on its own merit because no system based on the origins of British government is going to fly on its own merit because this thing is a clusterfuck.
well, and that's
Bye, passport.
yeah, and
See you in
also
Poland.
that's also part of the reason why, Washington is the Jove of the American pantheon, is because he did step down, and also, I mean, heck, Cincinnati is named after that fact.
Cincinnati. I was just about to say. That's what Boris Johnson tried to pull in the UK recently.
Yeah.
Which again, it's different now. It's different. We've been through a lot.
Yeah, there are several politicians who kind of showed up at once who very much reflect the worst aspects of some of the characters in this.
I mean, I will say, and I hold my teeth, I got with this one because this one is. I didn't think on rewatching this, and I probably had the thought the first time as well. To be fair, I got serious, and I mean serious. And this is a very British political comment, but Aaron Burr meet Nigel Farage. Except for the fact that the guy who plays Aaron Burr is black, you two are best buddies. You're the same person. Doesn't stand for anything. Slick prick in a suit. Has an answer for everyone, but doesn't really stand for anything.
I could have a beer with him.
The song, man, you can have a beer with him.
Yeah.
Honestly, watching the whole Jefferson versus Burr thing again today, it just felt like the recent Tory elections.
It did, didn't it? Like, to be fair, it felt like the recent American elections. Hell, it felt like the Obama Romney election. Remember the whole thing with Obama was Romney was this stuck-up prick but Obama was a friendly guy. Yes, he was a constitutional lawyer and was competent, but he had charisma.
Yeah.
And he could answer to a question. To this day, other than closing Gitmo, which he never actually did, I don't remember what Obama ran on a policy platform.
Yeah.
I'd have to Google it. And I'm not sure I'd find a straight answer. Same way with Clinton. What did Clinton run on? And not Trump. Well, that's not a policy law, that's a statement of fact.
Yeah.
And the reason I use those two examples specifically, it's the Keir Starmer said, I'm not the Tories. Well, dude, you are. You just stood on the other side of the room. There are very few politicians who most people know what they stand for when they vote for them. Like, I voted for Corbyn because I knew what he stood for. I knew what he stood against, but I also knew what he stood for.
Yeah.
And there's a great lesson in Hamilton where he says, in the end, he backs Jefferson. I'm not mixing up the white people again, am I? No, I'm not. He backs Jefferson. And he says, because at least, and he's basically said, at least I know what Jefferson stands for. I don't agree with them. But 75 disagreements and never once agreed is That's creative license right there. They agreed on a lot of things, but they disagreed on a lot of detail. But we put that down to poetic license. Vote for who you. It doesn't matter where someone stands. I would. This is the thing. This is why Trump was so frightening, because no one knew where he actually stood. All they knew is he didn't stand against those people.
Yeah.
And then when it turned out he didn't so much stand with them as he stood behind them and let them run ahead.
Yeah.
That was a problem. It's the same thing in the UK right now. Keir Starmer's winning in the polls, but only because right now no one knows what the Tory party actually is and if it's going to survive. Yeah. And to be honest, most of us don't know what Starmer stands for either. We know he doesn't stand for unions because he told his MPs not to join the picket lines. But other than that, I could tell you shit about what the man believes in. And it's a really important lesson that I think should be taken from this. It's okay on the history. It's fantastic on the choreography, the music, the showmanship is out of this world. I absolutely recommend it. It's brilliant. To me, this show bridges the gap between musical and opera. It's just, it's fantastic on all levels. All kudos to everyone involved in it from start to finish. But the main lesson for me is that line that keeps being repeated throughout, and it just hits fucking different. If you don't know what you stand for, what will you fall for?
Yeah.
And that's a question. I've said it on this channel so many times. That's what you need to know. I said it when we did the Holocaust last year, and we did
God on Trial.
God on Trial. I said you have to know who and what you are and what you're willing to die for, and what you're willing to fight for, and what you're willing to put up. You have to know where your lines are and make the decision before, because you don't want to be making that decision in the heat of the moment, because you won't be able to live with yourself afterwards if you do. Make the decisions.
And that'll have to do for our closing statement, because time.
Cool, time. That's why I've been talking so fast. We're on a time crunch, folks. Yeah. Okay, watch this movie. Love it. Enjoy it. Sing the songs. Take the lesson. Read up on the history. Yeah. That's my statement.
And I got out what I needed to get out. Next week, we're going to talk about the American Mythos of World War II with Saving Private Ryan.
Another long one to watch. Well worth it. Make sure you watch it up front, folks, because it is it's dense. There's a lot going on in there, and there's a lot to debunk. But there's also a lot of good stuff there as well.
Yeah. Chaos, you got anything going on?
Not particularly right now. I think literally my only comment would be in relation to this film is that it's another one that I absolutely love, that we've been especially hard on for probably the right reasons.
Yeah.
No, I think popcorn it, enjoy it. Don't take it. Don't cite it in an essay. Unless your essay is on the reception of American founding myths, then by all means cite it. But don't cite it as valid source on, like, it gives you the sources. Go read them. Go read the Reynolds pamphlet, the documents, the letters. They're all there. Go find them. It's pointing you there. Do it. And it does that very well, which again is another reason I love it, because it cites its sources. It may fuck with them and twist them, but it does cite its sources. So I can't argue with that.
Yep. And with that, taglines. Chaos?
Sorry. Have a day, and remember, communication is key.
Take care, be good, and if you can be good, remember, use your noodle.
And remember, the purpose of a storyteller is not to tell you how to think, but to give you questions to think on. Too often, we forget that.